After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
I mean, let's be real here.
That one appearance, the one appearance you made has
Yeah. That's it. It's the
that Patreon money is gonna be coming in. Mon ami, we got the Boku bucks right there. Oh gosh. Well, welcome back to the Greenhouse, dear listeners. Joining me again is our co-host Josh.
Always glad to be here.
And I'm pleased to welcome back our guest from episode 72, Muffuletta Matzo Man. Grayson, it's great to have you back.
It's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me back. I know there's a lot of controversy, and you all, had a Matt Healy-esque backlash to the podcast when I showed up. So I'm glad we're able to move past it. And
well, the little known facts, our host was recently banned from Twitter. So controversy sort of is the name of the game now.
Okay, so I'm gonna get into this, right? Because literally the last episode, I think I asked what would render the platform utterly unusable for you, and I think I hit my limit
from using it.
Yeah, and I'll just explain what happened recently, right? So in anticipation of Pride Month, I'm replying to a friend's joke. Queer individual makes a tweet. I don't know what poppers are, and I'm too scared to ask at this point. In a banterish mood, I respond with a picture of Pop Rock's candy. As soon as I hit post, the screen goes white, and it's like, your account is under review. Do you want to appeal? Yeah, it literally just lock out. Like, the nanny state got my ass. They put me in the pod and made me eat the bugs. So literally, they give me the option to appeal, and I'm like, yeah, I'll appeal. And in the comment I wrote, look at the picture and tell me this is a threat. Because they literally, you are suspended for threatening self-harm or encouraging self-harm, self-abuse. Right. In a thing that, any sane person looking at this is like, how is that anything of the sort? So they locked my account for 12 hours. They didn't really give me any indication that was going to be 12 hours. They said it will be locked indefinitely. Then eventually, I think today or so, I get a screen that says, yeah, your account will be active in 1 minute.
In 1 minute, okay.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and then I got it back. So
hold your ass, because you're coming back hot and fast.
Oh yeah. So it's
I feel like so much of just a legacy of Elon's whole oh, I want people to be just producing all the content on this platform. So he wants you to have 20 things queued up immediately once you're unsuspended.
I mean, here's the thing: if we had a Patreon or something else, we could immediately have turned that into a fundraising shtick, or I could be complaining about being shadow banned. Personally, though, I think either one of the mods had it in for me, or more likely, the content moderation has to have some kind of accountability, because they can't explain why all these Nazis still stay on the platform. But they got to get somebody. That's where I come in.
Yeah, I guess so. They just, they settled for the next best thing. They're like, hey, Indian, Hindu nationalists, let's just, but not one of the ones that we can't ban because they're, giving us money to censor content. This is someone who hasn't paid his dues, so this is what we do to him.
Hindu nominally, nationalist for which country? Sure thing. Yeah, I think I hit the point where it's okay, we have to really reconcile one role as this quote unquote online left, because the vast majority of us, myself included, I'm really talking about myself here, aren't really involved in any major project. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do in my day-to-day. But two, these platforms are either hostile to basically left-wing content, if not just practically unusable at this point. So that's my 2 cents on the affair. Maybe it's time to leave Twitter for the simple reason that you can't use it productively anymore. Who's to say? I don't know. I don't
ever, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, like, as someone who's involved and has been involved in DSA for a long time, one of the main platforms of communication people use within the organization is Twitter, and it is like a weird thing where it's being run by a fucking, apartheid white supremacist guy who's actively like, right, like there's always like a latent, obviously nobody's under the impression that Twitter was some sort of, anyone with a fucking brain wasn't under the impression that Twitter was some sort of left-wing platform, and leftists have always been disproportionately targeted, which is just kind of the norm. But now it's just almost outrageous. I mean, it is outrageous, just the difference in treatment, and like, people pretty much appealing bans by being like, I'm actually a Nazi, why would you do this? And they're like, oh, we didn't know, sorry. And so it's really, I don't think we've really ever seen something like that where like a mainstream platform has just become so explicitly right wing and the owner is just so intimately involved and has
at least this rapidly.
I mean, I can't think of anything that's comparable, right? Like,
I mean, like Jack Dorsey was, in the Peter Thiel circle, but he never wore that on his badge.
That's fair.
Like he never wore that publicly, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it was never like, we're defeating the woke, right? Like that's what Elon is saying consistently and shit. And so it's a weird position, and it's like funny to see all the people who are invested in him not really know what to do because they're like, oh, it's like I have insane amount of money tied up in this guy's shit, and he's talking about, he's mad because his daughter's trans and shit like that.
Pretty much.
Well, and when you importantly dropped, probably, the first of, don't do a drinking game for the amount of times that we say woke this episode, because we're kind of talking about, the Burgermeister of anti-wokeness, if you would.
Yeah, and Elon's also alignment specifically with DeSantis is interesting, and obviously we're going to discuss that. I mean, we kind of bring a circle to our intended discussion around DeSantis, right?
Yeah, I guess before we segue into our main discussion, because that is Pandora's box we're about to open. So let's do like our quick housekeeping before we get into that. So since this is part of our Democalypse 2024 coverage, we would be remiss not to mention that at the time of this recording, I think McCarthy successfully got the debt ceiling raised.
I believe they are still voting.
Yeah, so if they don't figure this out by Monday, big doo-doo. But, debt ceiling, more like driving me up the debt wall.
Yeah, and I mean, this is, I'm not going to spend too much time on the debt ceiling itself, right? But I mean, it kind of, I think it sort of highlights some things that kind of directly tie into what we're talking about today, right? Where basically, the compromise isn't with McCarthy. Obviously, has a lot of conservative wish list items, but of course, it is not good enough in the slightest for the vast majority of these folks who are willing to burn the whole country down to get what they want. And already DeSantis is sort of using it as like political fodder, and other candidates I'm sure will as well.
Exactly.
In this, and I mean, whether or not they are genuine in their dismay, disappointment, whatever you want to call it. Maybe that's probably up for debate, but overall, I think it's definitely something that's going to highlight a lot of the sheer level of extremism that we're really dealing with.
Speaking of extremism, albeit of a differing variety, Chris Christie, yes, he is the widest man to enter the race this time. I must admit, I have to eat. Yeah, he has basically announced he will be declaring in New Hampshire either he's already about to or has. Let me pull up the article here. There was a quick article from Axios, and you guys are gonna chuckle. So let's see. So he is expected to announce his 2024 Republican candidacy next Tuesday in New Hampshire. Axios has learned why it matters. A former Trump ally now calls Trump a coward and a puppet of Putin. Gives traditional Republicans a horse, but seems to have a narrow market. So, according to his campaign team, there are 3 things we can expect from him. Being joyful. You cannot say that about this is fat phobia, dear God. Being joyful and hitting a more hopeful note aimed at America's exhaust. Being jolly. He's a big old fella coming
white beard and Santa hats. That's right. Chris Christie's running to be your Santa Claus. The United States of America.
Run to be your mall Santa.
Anyone see that picture of William Howard Taft where he's just smiling and it's just a big picture of his face and the caption is Bill? If they bring that back, I would be interested, but I doubt that's going to happen.
It's interesting because, like, aside from Trump, this is the only repeat candidate, right? All the other, like, these people who were like touted as like the future of the Republican Party, like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, they're all gone. But Chris Christie remains.
Pretty much.
That he can just chill in office and make a lot of money doing nothing. Like, he doesn't show up to any votes. So, and he really, it's well known that he hates being in the Senate, but then he recently realized that I don't actually have to go. Like, he doesn't have to go, and so he just doesn't go anymore, and so he feels a lot better, and he's just like, I'll just be in Senate.
Yeah, there was some weird articles around the time of his presidential candidacy, because originally he wasn't going to, like, he was just running for president, and his Senate term was up, and he wasn't going to run. And ironically, like, because there was like a whole slate of primary candidates for that seat, and when he announced, like, oh, actually, I'm going to keep my job, because I lost this primary horribly, all these candidates just dropped out for him. So, like, all that money and resources that they did just completely wasted. And I remember there was like a Politico article at the time where it was like titled like how Marco Rubio learned to love the Senate, and like in like this very like how Doctor Strange love how I learned to love the bomb framing. It was really weird.
That's so funny because I never read it, but I just hear talk, like, being in Florida, being part of certain conversations. It was what I know what happens in his office and how he is and everything, and so yeah, it was like I've heard repeatedly, like, he's fine with being in the Senate now because he just makes flop and nobody gives a fuck if he doesn't show up and do anything. So, but he went from like he hated it. He hates being a legislator. It's really funny. He really hates the job. And the whole point of like climbing up to Senate was to be the president, and then he didn't get that. And then someone was just like, dude, you can just do this forever, and like, there's nothing, right? Like, there's no consequences for you by doing nothing. And he's like, wait a second.
Yeah, and like,
why would I ever be president ever again?
Yeah, and it's like weird where it's like that whole ambition. It's like when you're young enough like that, you'd think like, oh, well, there's always just next time. And it's like, no, there's no next time. It's just over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, Rick Scott wants to run for president, but he didn't because he actually is, I think, he's in a better position than DeSantis is for a lot of reasons, like politically. Because he's
also senator. Isn't Rick Scott like kind of caked up, just like not just in a financial way, right? Like, wasn't he like a pharma exec before all this?
Yeah, he committed the largest Medicaid fraud in history. He literally was about to be arrested. He walked out the back of his like office building and barely escaped getting caught by the FBI.
They just decided they wouldn't go for him again.
Pretty much, he got away with it. Yeah, he completely got away with it. And so the interesting thing is, so Rick Scott is, so we'll go to DeSantis, right? Like, let's if everyone wants to talk about DeSantis, like, because this is related to DeSantis. Rick Scott and DeSantis don't get along. They never have gotten along. They don't like each other. They don't give a fuck about each other. I think Rick Scott's savvier than DeSantis. But again, they have different like circumstances and come from very different backgrounds. Rick Scott is a senator, and so he's long ass terms, 6-year terms, that he can be in office forever. So it's fine. DeSantis, on the other hand, doesn't have that luxury. You got 2 terms, each are 4 And then what? So DeSantis knows he can't run for Senate because he knows he's not beating Rubio. Like, it wouldn't work to go against Rubio or Scott. It's like, so he's stuck. He's nowhere to go up. He's nowhere to go. He doesn't want to go back. He can't go back to Congress, right? So he can either be president or he can go fuck himself. And so that's why DeSantis, despite Trump being like, I'm going to fucking kill you, is going so full bore right here. He basically feels like his back against the wall is against the wall in like a sense. He's also very confident in himself, but like he also just knows, and it's right, it's true. Like I think it's actually a very true thing. It's like he'll be out of office the next time presidential election's coming up. Nobody will give a fuck about him. He's no shot. And so yeah, so that's kind of why DeSantis is pushed so hard. He's so hard. Trump losing was a big, it was like DeSantis essentially right as soon as it happened, the DeSantis team really shifted, and very much started being like, well, look how good we did here in Florida. We take credit for that, and from there they kind of try and build a narrative that they're the real fighters and Trump's a idiot, pussy, loser, idiot, and I mean their whole angle is DeSantis is DeSantis is the real right wing warrior and Trump is actually a rhino. And again, we can discuss later like the effectiveness of this messaging, but like that's actually what they think too. They actually do believe that. So yeah, I don't know.
I guess I don't know if the exact order that we have for this, right? But like, the rewinding the clock.
Well, this is greenhouse gaslighting. The order doesn't matter.
Yeah, like rewinding the clock a little bit on DeSantis. So like let's like look at like when he ran for re-election, right? That we're not going back that far. Like he the immediate narrative, right, is that like he kind of alone sort of created this sort of Republican wave or whirlpool or whatever in a year where they were supposed to dominate but didn't. And the dominant narrative, right, is that like, oh well, and like for whatever reason, like we continue. I've always kind of considered Florida not so much a battleground state anymore. As someone who's got a little bit more, firsthand experience, is that maybe uncharitable or like explain kind of from the more grounded perspective of actually being there, like what went into like him winning re-election.
It's really what went into everyone else against him, which was nothing. I think they raised 1/10 the amount of money on the Dem side for the gubernatorial race. It might have been even less, right? So there's a lot of factors. I'll start, and I don't take offense at all. I want to emphasize this because I think it's very difficult to parse the narratives and what is real and what isn't, and so much of the political realities of the United States is drowned and obfuscated in media narratives and people really are unable to truly like just discern the material forces at work and at play that create the conditions and the results that we see, and the way it's portrayed to us and packaged to us is this kind of like horse race bullshit, right? And so I know Florida the best because it's where I'm born and raised. I started doing political stuff in Florida as soon as I was fucking 18, right? Like I moved to Orlando in 2014. I started getting like involved then, doing campaign work. I started working full time in 2016 in campaign work. I've run campaigns. I've had and none of this is like trying to be like braggadocious. It's not who gives a fuck, right? Like it's more about just like I've kind of journeyed and made a path and had a very intimate knowledge with like Florida's political institutions, and not just like, oh, the state legislature voted this way, but like who is doing what levers of power exist, what constituencies exist, how things work, yada yada yada, like whatever. And so what I would say is like the 2020 election was a culmination of like years and years and years of incompetency.
2020 or 2022?
2022. Sorry, 2022 was the essentially the dam bursting. Not in like the secret Republican vote has been unlocked, but in the rotten Democrat opposition has finally faltered to the point where it's like outrageous, right? And they can't like because they had this balancing act that they've been running since 2012, right? Which people forget, but Obama won Florida back to back. I find it very difficult to say that Florida's gotten like demographically more conservative. It hasn't. Just statistically, you can just look and be like, okay, it's actually gotten slightly younger. We always hear about the retirees. Yes, there's a fucking ton of them, and they suck. But like, it's gotten a little bit younger. It's got really high wealth inequality. It's gotten, it's one of the most progressive. I mean, one of the most diverse states in the country. Yeah, whatever. Like, it really should. There should be some sort of backward slide. It doesn't really make any sense for Florida. But it does make sense when you realize that the Democrats have continually fucked everybody here, very, very much on purpose, right? And people like when I say the Democrats, right? The Democratic Party here isn't like a party, and of course, no Democratic Party is whatever. But like here, it's really not a party. Like it doesn't exist in like a real tangible sense. It is a consultancy firm. It essentially exists as like a legal entity to employ high profile, highly expensive consultants to run everything for the state stuff. And they do. Right. I got some information today. I can't share, it's not public yet, but like I'll talk about it. When it comes public, I'll comment about it publicly. It's just and the outrageous stuff that's going on with the state party. People just people involved in politics here know. But even then, I think people kind of really try to like hold on to some sort of like, okay, they're just kind of stupid but no, the people who run the show, the consultants who runs one of the consultants, main consultants, and she's been here since like 2016. Her husband is one of the biggest donors to Trump. Right, like she's been hired every single election. She's still working for the Florida Democratic Party. They pay her a lot of fucking money. Probably made her a millionaire by this point. There's something called a ghost candidate scheme here, where the Republican Party literally rigged like 20 state elections here, and won all those elections that they rigged. They rig all the elections here, but they really rigged these elections in that they explicitly created like an illegal super PAC to run, often without people even knowing, run third-party candidates that had almost the same exact name as the Democrat.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So again, this gets like no fucking discussion, and it's insane that this happened. It's literally like they stole Florida, and nobody did anything. And this stuff, right? Like DeSantis calculates this stuff. This goes into DeSantis' calculations, like how far can I push it? Well, turns out I can fucking go anywhere with it, and nothing will happen to me, right? Like nothing happens to him. There's been zero pushback. There's been zero consequences for this guy doing outrageous, but like in 2018 we passed the reenfranchisement of felons amendment.
Yeah, felons, yeah.
Yeah, well, guess what? It doesn't work. They didn't implement it. There's something called enabling language that you have to create as like a legislature for constitutional amendments, and they just essentially interpreted they created a poll tax. They're like, if you don't pay your fees, you can't vote. Well, guess what? It's literally impossible to know how much you owe in court fees in Florida, right? There's no central directory, and the courts actually went over this. The courts acknowledged this, and they still ruled, oh, but it's not a poll tax, it's legal. Even though they fucking said, they're like, the state of Florida doesn't have any. It's not possible for people to know. Like, it's not possible for any agency to even know because you get charged for going to jail, so you get fees from your county, you get charged while you're held there, you get charged depending on whether you go to a private prison or a state-run prison. You get charged in private prison for a bed tax, and I get, all these fucking things. It's not possible to really know unless you literally have like a pretty, and we're talking about people for felonies, so like typically are doing like real prison time. It's you can't know. So they just did that and created a poll tax, and the federal judiciary was like, okay, fine, it's okay. DeSantis has completely broken the law, the Voting Rights Act, right? Like they got rid of it requires like some sort of majority minority district in the state. Got rid of it. Doesn't exist. No one's done anything to stop it. No one fucking talks about this. And even the Republican Party was like, we don't really want to do this, and he made them come back and do it. And they really were openly like, we don't really think this is necessary. He's like, no, I'm trying to prove a point here. And so they did the Coast candidate scheme, rigged all this election, but the Democratic Party, and you can stop again. No, they hired this guy, consultant, as the treasurer for the Florida Democratic Party. He'd worked previously for the Florida Democratic Party, then left, running his consulting firm. He was the fucking guy who managed all the money for the Ghost candidate scheme. He was the treasurer for the Florida Democratic Party. He worked for the Florida Democratic Party it was hired by them while running this Ghost candidate scheme that was literally rigging elections against incumbent Democrats and gave the Republicans a supermajority in the state Senate, allowing them to do all the awful state legislation that you've been seeing without any handcuffs. They stole 20 elections with the help of the Democratic Party here. So it's no fucking shit. He can do what he wants. There's no opposition here. They help him, right? They're in bed. It's all a little big game here. So there's no like,
Well, I remember seeing recently there was that video of like the Florida legislature with them doing like the cha-cha slide or whatever.
Right. And that's not even like right, like, they're doing it because they're like dapping each other. It's because the Democrats who are like, and mind you, a lot of those state legislators, they're not even involved in like these schemes. They don't even know. They don't know. They're fucking totally don't know what the fuck is going on. They're completely unaware that they're just essentially apolitical. They don't understand the severity of it. Most of these people are very privileged, right? Like, because in Florida, if you're a state legislator, you get paid like a fucking idiot. You get paid $32K a year. It's not your job.
Wow.
You do not like this. It's a horrible job. What sucks is that it's literally
Is it a part-time legislature? I don't remember.
No, it's not. It's only in session for like 3 or 4 months, but that's not true, right? Like you have committees throughout the whole year, and there's constituency work all year, right? Like Texas, they only meet like once every 2 years, like whatever. In Florida, it is they're only in session for a portion of the year, but they are working the whole year. It is insanely underpaid, and so only rich people can do it. And so a lot of the Democrats are well, but yeah, they're also just libs, and so they're like, John Hitler, and they're like fine with it. So they do the fucking cha-cha slide with like literal people who are like, I don't know, see, and they're like,
so quite honestly,
great good times with Nazis. Let's go.
So quite literally, like, this is the existing criticism we've heard often of like the Democratic National Committee, where the actual actors within the party are kind of asleep at the wheel, and there's a consulting class that folks on shows like Chapo have called this like a make work scheme for fail sons. Except in the case of Florida, it's like take that and magnify it by 1,000, possibly.
I wouldn't even say that the leadership, the Democratic Party leadership, is asleep at the wheel here. They're in on it, right? Like they are 100% in on it. They're not asleep at the wheel. They don't care.
Well, I think what's interesting.
I'll say this: I've been threatened by the previous Democratic minority leader running a campaign, and had a fake lawsuit filed against my candidate by a Republican. to get us to drop out. They know.
Well,
they're part of. They're all in on it. They fucking talk like they're all friends. So if they're not asleep at the wheel here, they're the Democratic leadership here are like consultants. They love the consultants, and they love the Republicans. They don't care.
Well, and it's interesting too because I know like one of the major criticisms of obviously the 2022 candidate was Charlie Crist and whatnot, former Republican, and there was sort of what
Chain Gang Charlie. That was his nickname when I was a kid, and when he was elected as governor as a Republican.
Yes, yeah. So like he had this. So like it was they nominated him, and it was kind of. I think it was sort of sold, maybe not in Florida, but at least at the national level. It's just sort of this like attempt for like bipartisanship, right, or whatever. Like Florida's, so far gone. Like this is what we have to do, or whatever. It is, and I think pretty clearly it did not play out in any way that I think you could write off as a success or worthwhile experiment. But it's interesting that like what you've described is not so much that was like maybe more innocent or whatever, that it's kind of part of the same like maybe even malicious design that this party has had at the state level for however long it's been in this current status quo.
I agree with that. I think that's a great summation of it. What I would say to really just like drive my point home is that Florida is a state primed at the pump for fascism by design.
Sure.
And it kind of relates to what Adi and I talked about in the previous podcast, right? Like the history of Florida. And Florida has been essentially a proving ground for American exportation of fascism, and it's also the first place where it's experimented with in a lot of respects. And so what we're seeing is what they want to do to the rest of the country, right? It's all trial, right?
And Make America Florida is pretty explicit.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that's what they want to do. And so DeSantis is essentially he is the manifestation of the imperial fascist spirit of America, right? Like he is the Iraq War, the second Gulf War. He is like he was a jag there, right? Like he came up. He is a Italian American guy, and I kind of joke with people, but I think it is true. It's like there's like a tendency among like white ethnics to really like they're kind of like the fucking orc warriors and shit for the WASP rich white class, in that they really want to prove to their masters that they're white and that they'll enforce the white order. And so you do see, it's like, and it's not all Italians in Florida, right? Like actually, I'd say most Italians in Florida are Democrats, especially if they live in South Florida, which is where my family's originally from. But like you do see this like tendency to emerge among like people like a DeSantis, right? With their name, and he's definitely a guy who wants to prove how American white he is. That you can see with his wife being like Jackie O with her cosplay, and how he goes to Iowa and he goes, Iowa's, then you say Florida's the fucking, Iowa the South, and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, Florida's not anything like. It's not really like any other state. He grew up in a middle class suburban family. Fucking in Pinellas County, Florida. Really no problems. He was good at baseball. Went to fucking Harvard. Played baseball for Harvard. And Harvard is a great little fascist factory, right? Like fraternities, and the baseball team is basically like its own fraternity right there. Really hardcore right-wing entities that exist, and he willingly participated and joined that. And then he left, and he gradually goes and he went to Yale Law. And he's hitting all the marks. He's hitting all the marks, right? And what does he do after Yale Law? He becomes a jag. He becomes a fucking lawyer in the military.
So Grayson, can just real quick for the beginners too, can you explain what JAG does in the context of the military-industrial context?
I mean, honestly, JAGs do fucking a lot of things. Like, a lot of people are just like a lot of times JAGs are like the internal public defenders, soldiers, right? Like, because there's military courts, stuff like that. It depends on what you want to do as a JAG. Now he willingly pursued a special operations JAG path, and in combat too. He never served in combat, obviously.
Yeah, he made it to lieutenant, but he was the JAG and legal consultant for SEAL Team 1, I recall reading.
Yes.
And and then also he was a legal advisor in Fallujah, from what I understand. He probably giving them legal cover for all that.
Yes.
And then to top it off, this is just something that I was reading recently. A person who was imprisoned at Guantanamo recalls that he was present during force feedings. So
actually recall him.
Yes, so more than just one.
Multiple Guantanamo Bay prisoners do remember him. Yes, he went to Fallujah. He went to the black site prisons in Iraq and in Baghdad. And then he went to Guantanamo Bay.
Mm.
When he left Guantanamo Bay, he straight up said, "I love torture. We need to keep doing torture. We need to do more of it." Right? Like he's on the record saying like, "Yeah, we should do more of this." Right? He's a sick bastard. And so he did. And so it's like he's a lawyer, and he was a lawyer for some of the most heinous colonial crimes of the United States. So he literally was like on the front lines of imperial fascism, and was helping like craft the legal narrative necessary to implement it, right, and maintain it. He is like the tipping point of this shit. Really, like it cannot be emphasized enough what he comes from and what he really represents and his rise. And so he leaves the military and he becomes a congressman in Florida, in Jacksonville, which is whatever. And he's actually kind of tries to portray himself as a moderate, because historically in Florida, it's well known that Republican rule was kind of shaky and required tiptoeing around, especially on social issues, because the state is a Dixiecrat state. Historically, constitutionally, oppresses minorities. So like it's always been minority rule that has not changed. It's only gotten consistently more egregious, and so Republicans kind of are like, well, we'll keep winning, and we'll make sure the corporate tax is low, right? But we're not going to touch abortion. We're not going to touch immigration, and they didn't. They wouldn't, right? They really didn't here. I mean, honestly, they passed a lot of immigration reform. Rick Scott passed a bunch of immigration reform when he was the governor here in Florida, right? It was a tricky situation for Republicans, and they actually really had to navigate it because they didn't want backlash.
And that's kind of historically put them in a bad spot nationally.
Yeah, they could
at least for
really
presidential races and whatnot.
Yeah, they're not. They could really never come out of Florida and be like, "I'm a fucking." People really would be like, "You're a fucking rhino," and they're not. But the situation in Florida is like strategically called for it. But DeSantis, when he ran initially, he ran as a moderate. He was pro-environmental, but no social issues, nothing. Didn't talk about it at all. In 2018, never came up really, just business stuff. Barely won. Again, I could talk forever about that election. Again, a stolen election. For a lot of reasons. The Gillum campaign also just catastrophically bad because they hired a bunch of Hillary people. But again, I want to focus on DeSantis, and so he barely wins that election. I mean, again, and he knows he didn't really win the election, right? Like if you're winning by like 0.7 in Florida and you're a Republican, it's like, whew, I'm glad that they hit it, threw out enough ballots for me to win this one, because geez, like that's the reality, and they do throw out ballots here. Actually, their favorite tactic is the mail ballots. If they're coming from like black areas or like whatever areas they consider more democratic, they just conveniently leave them in like in the postal office like areas, and then they're like, oh no, they didn't get shipped out. How'd this happen? and then you don't have to count the votes. Either they just don't send the ballots to people, or they get the ballots back and then they just slide the bins behind some box and shit, and then they don't get sent out. That's just one of the many ways that they rig the elections here.
If that seems like a stretch to you, dear listener, look up hanging.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing I'm talking about right now, like that's also public knowledge too, right? Like
it just came out in Texas as well that the attorney general there did basically the exact same stuff. So it's not not a foreign tactic to these figures.
Yeah. I mean, the Democrats were going around during the recount. They're like, boxes in Overland in this black neighborhood. It's like, no shit, guys, it's too late. Like, whatever. And so he barely won that election. So when he first came to office, he was running. He was doing the typical thing here. He was treading lightly. And then COVID came, and it wasn't really COVID. I think it was more so George Floyd that made DeSantis kind of go, okay, we need to crack down as hard as possible because this tiptoeing thing is not going to last for us forever. We've been scraping by and scraping by, but this is and again, this is a guy, he knows how to put down the colonial revolt.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
In any Caribbean settlement, that's kind of what you got to do, right?
He was in fucking Volusia. He was in Volusia.
There you go.
He put down the revolt. That was his job. George Floyd, right, happens, and that's when all hell, like, he pretty much realized, you know what, I can ram all this through, and no one, like, he did some test balloons. COVID was a great thing, because it was like, what if I literally, like, just break this thing. We had lockdowns in Florida. They love talking about how we did. We did. I experienced it. Disney shut down, right? The state never said, "Oh, you must lock down," but essentially gave guidance to all of the counties to say, like, "Yeah, you should lock down," and they did. The whole state did, and I would say that Florida probably did more of a lockdown than Georgia. I really would say that. Mm-hmm. People were fine with it. Nobody had any problem with it. Everyone was it was very popular. DeSantis' team, they were actually bragging recently about how they reopened schools even though 77% of parents opposed it in Florida. And they're like, see, that's how fucking conservative we are. We can do that. 77%
despite advocating at large for this, parental bill of rights, BS.
Yeah. But my thing is that those experiences, he was like, oh, I can just let me keep pushing from there. And so the Floyd uprisings happened. They're really intense here in Florida. They're intense everywhere, but I think for like a quote unquote Republican state, I would argue they're probably the most intense. I'd probably say that they're the most intense out of any quote unquote Republican state. Maybe Texas, Austin stuff was like got near. I can't really speak to Texas. Maybe Texas had a similar ish, and again, I think that would be, to me, makes sense because Texas is also like a minority ruled state. But it was really like, I mean, I was part of the stuff in Orlando. It was just fighting, brutal, like police versus protester every day. We were running, they had special jurisdiction established, special curfews, all this shit. It was intense. It was really intense for months. So I think DeSantis was like, oh wow, we got to make these fuckers like go away, right? Like he kind of had his Nixon moment, right, when Nixon was like, how do we get all the black people and hippies to fuck off? That's kind of what, and so that's why they're like, okay, crack cocaine and heroin. DeSantis was like, okay, the legal system. actually, let me just use the American legal system to do whatever, like to do fascism because it's built for it. It's totally good for it. So he did.
Well, I mean, he was a jag, literally. Like, it's
yeah, but he knows. So he knows.
He pioneered the field. He was trained in it, basically. Like
he was trained in it. He was on the front lines of it. He was literally like one of those guys who's like, enhanced interrogation is totally illegal. Like, he is that. So he's the governor of the third largest state of the country. He's like, how do I get rid of this colonial revolt? The Poors are rising up like a multiracial revolt against American the American police state. Let me think. There you go. And so everything you've seen out there is kind of trickle from there. And so he's kind of combined that with it's also intersected with his presidential ambitions, right? Like, well, how am I going to be the president, right? Well, I need to create a lane for myself. And so I can, part of it is like he's also trying to appeal to the white suburbanite class that exists in the American, psyche, right? Your Staten Island people, your Long Island people, your white Philly people, like suburban white Philly people, your suburban Detroit people, like white suburban Detroiters, right? Like the real block of fascism, right? The building blocks of fascism. Frankly, that group of people is not a huge group in Florida. So that's why he does all this shit that isn't very popular here, but there's no consequences to what he does, so it doesn't really matter. And you're like, who is this for? It's because he's literally like trying to get the vote of some like extremely racist Irish couple, in their 50s in Philadelphia. I'm not kidding. And it kind of works sometimes. Like I remember going to Philly and like people would not shut the fuck up to me about DeSantis. I was shocked. I was like, I'm from Florida, and only time people talk to me about DeSantis is to complain. Nobody's like, oh wow. You guys can.
Yeah, he's typically how I identify my conservative students is their infatuation with him. This past year he's been pretty popular among those groups.
Yeah, and so he's kind of the legislative policy you're seeing was initially, I think, really very very much, and it was explicit. Like he did anti-protest bills. You legalize quote unquote running over protesters and stuff. It was very like, all right, put down the revolt, and then he was like, well, putting down the revolt, that might make me president. And now all the shit that you see, all the culture war bullshit. Florida's like a gay as fuck state. It's a really gay state. It's one of the gayest states, right? It has historic gay communities. Gay LGBTQ representation is very prominent. Has always been prominent in Florida's history. Always, because Florida's always had like a lot of show business and show town and shit like that, and gay people like that stuff. I guess I don't know what to say. It's like Orlando's always had a gay population because Orlando has always had like a theater scene. Oh, it's just known for that. It's always been here. And then Disney came, and gay people like Disney, and they work at Disney. Like literally, that's just how things worked here. And so, and so it's not like a popular like this. The social conservatism isn't really really where you can see the DeSantis going from like I'm putting down the revolt to I'm trying to win the presidency, right? Like because the social conservatism is not necessary. It frankly it's hurting the Republicans actually in Florida. They probably and that's why they probably lost the most recent the Jacksonville mayoral race. They got creamed in it actually. Because this is not actually what people want at all. It's actually really unpopular here by probably a super majority. And so, but DeSantis doesn't give a fuck, right? Like, that there is a mess. He's gonna leave a mess here. It's already a huge mess. A lot of the stuff he's done is like completely impossible to maintain. There's going to be massive like budgetary problems. Like there's a lot of stuff that he's just setting up to just have catastrophic failure. The college system is going to face like huge issues. All this stuff. But it's all to be president. And it turns out, it shows you just the depravity of the United States that you it's a legitimate strategy to become the most powerful person in the country and in turn the world by just blowing up a sub-state entity. Like literally, I run the third largest state in the country and I'm fucking nuking it so I can be God. I can be God of the world. That's the plan.
So just like a couple observations here, right? Is like it goes to show just how much people outside of Florida, one, have no fucking idea what goes on in the state, period. But then also how much of Florida Republican stuff is pretty much like they're probably the masters of AstroTurf politics at as far as it goes, right? But
yeah, they're great at it.
yeah, and then something I was thinking too, right, is like as you're mentioning that DeSantis is taking all these culture war battles and then projecting them onto Florida as a whole, I'm starting to look back at certain events from like the past couple of years. So if anyone remembers the special election in Virginia for their Senate race, I think that's maybe the opening salvo in the recent theater of the culture war, right? Where like the culture war microcosm was projected into this Senate race. And then from that point onwards, we've been in a just a
was
horrible...
it the Senate race or it was the Youngkin, right? Wasn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly the one I'm referencing.
And that was the school board stuff, and like the train, like that's when they really started to do the school board stuff and and everything.
Yeah, and CRT was kind of the opening tactic.
Funny enough, like that tactic really had like a lot of success. Funny enough, they haven't had a great deal of success, like not nearly as much success as you would expect in Florida on like the school board running for school board, like the crazy Moms for Liberty people. They actually haven't done well here. Like they really don't. They don't control any major areas. They don't control any major school districts or whatever. In Florida, they haven't even gotten close. There's like one here in Orlando. There's one lady, and everyone hates her, and she's almost for sure gonna lose her re-election because people just didn't even know who she was. So
parlaying that just a bit further, right? Like the demographic that this cohort of like people who support DeSantis, particularly outside in Florida, they're kind of reminding me of like the cliques you'd see at say 2016 and prior of like Ted Cruz stands, and Ted Cruz kind of is maybe the inventor of this culture warrior lane on the right. And the revelation I had taking a violent shit before we started recording this is that, if this was a Pokemon evolution, Ron DeSantis is like the next thing you get from Ted Cruz after it like gets to level 16 pretty much. So I'm almost wondering, one, like, do they both occupy a similar niche in American conservative politics? But then also like this culture war lane isn't exactly that new, is it?
No, but at the same time, I feel like it highlights just how far right it's gone, right? Like, I mean, the stuff Ted Cruz was talking about in 16 would make him look like a moderate in the Republican Party, right? He'd be dismissed
today,
as a almost. Like, I mean, I remember, like one of the big issues, and you'd think, being a JAG and whatnot, you'd hear more about it from DeSantis. But like, the war on terror is pretty much like rhetorically over in terms of like it doesn't really seem to have much like purchase with like anyone anymore. No one talks about it. But like
even though it changed the game legally.
He actually freaks out if you ask him about the Guantanamo Bay and stuff. He doesn't.
There was that. Was that in Israel? Was that big like viral one where he just kind of lost his mind?
Pissed.
Yeah, where he had a really friendly crowd, anyways. But yeah, it's like I remember like in 2016, like everyone like kind of maybe besides Trump. I mean, I think Trump like he kind of just made the case that like everyone that ran the war on terror sucked, including Bush. But for the most part, they like the whole focus was like, oh, like Obama sucks because he's like too pussy to, call it radical Islam, and that's the whole. And like, and it's just weird where we kind of like, I wouldn't say we moved beyond Islamophobia, but like we've just like superseded it with just like vitriol for like every group under the sun.
Obviously, there's still Islamophobia, but like I've definitely seen like and you've seen like generally a trend amongst like the hard right people, especially on like the internet, but like just in general, like almost like an appreciation of really conservative like examples of Islamic society, and people being like, Sharia law, I don't like what we want. You can kill gay people. So
I mean, they would never like openly endorse Sharia law because that's still a little poisonous. But yeah, they would see like, oh yeah, that at least they're on the right side of the culture war. And you get all these takes too about Putin as well, right? Where it's like, well, he's at least he's not pro cancel culture. At least he believes in killing gay people as well.
Yeah, he hates gay people. No, yeah, and so they're definitely like a kind of like a. Again, I'm not gonna claim like. Actually, Islamophobia is over, but like I'm saying, like
it's not recognized to the same extent.
It's just they don't use it as like a political. There's no ground zero mosque anymore. They're not like, does everyone? You guys remember that when they're like, they're gonna build a mosque on top of 9/11 to taunt us.
No, now it's Chick-fil-A. It passed a diversity and equity and inclusion thing, and they're concerned about it.
Chick-fil-A is late to the party. Cracker Barrel had a DEI office open first.
All these companies have DEI offices because
everybody has a DEI office. It's part of it's. Jordan Peterson said it once, and everyone's been like looking out for it ever since.
It's the most meaningless thing. It's literally whatever. There's no reason to go into it. But yeah, I mean, and so actually the DEI stuff is kind of brings you to Disney and DeSantis.
Yeah.
Good thing to talk about, right? Like, this is where DeSantis goes too far, right? He gets too big for his britches.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I go, well, he's not very savvy. He's right when it comes to like the actual legal system. There is no pushback. He will not get any pushback. He can do what he wants. There's a difference, though, when it comes to the, Florida corporations. Disney's fucking huge, and extremely powerful here. It's everywhere it is, but here, it's huge, right? And DeSantis decided to try and make an example out of Disney, and specifically Disney's workers, right? Disney didn't care about the anti-gay stuff, but Disney's workforce did, and there's huge. Living in Orlando, I was very much privy to it. Huge backlash internally within Disney and demands from all sections of the labor force, from even the C-suite to the just like right, all the theme park workers, right? Like people fucking pissed about it, and so Disney was really kind of forced to. They had, oh my god, I can't even tell you how many meetings they had, internal meetings they had trying to calm everyone down, like huge all-call things meeting, like and it wouldn't work because people were pissed. A lot of Disney workers are gay, probably close to a plurality of them, and so they finally were kind of like, okay, maybe this will get all of our workers to stop. We'll put out a little minor statement, very meager thing where they're like, maybe don't do this, Bill. I don't know. And DeSantis is like, no, now I can really prove myself, right? He saw it as a challenge, and he got too big for his britches, and now he just won't let it go. He He keeps going at Disney, and he keeps trying to push and push and push. They gave him a whole year. To cool off on this, and he just wouldn't do it. He can't take the L on it, and they try to soften the blow constantly with it. And now Disney's suing him. Probably gonna get the law overturned. All this other shit. Very, very, very huge. I would say huge mistake from him. I think it's representative of why he was never going to be president, right? Like he was never really able. He was never going to get that far, even though he is like the encapsulation of like fascism in America. Is that ultimately like it's really hard to I don't know, pull that line through. And so, it's not like Disney isn't some sort of Republican loving corporation. Obviously they are. It's the fact that he's essentially blew up their spot. They don't like that. They don't like that, so they're pushing back. And Republicans here in Florida are like, ugh, this is kind of fucking hurting us, dude. Like, why are you doing this? Or like, so he's gotten pushed back internally, and he doesn't care because he's so focused on the national. He doesn't care. He's burnt a lot of bridges recently. He really has. It's part of the reason why he's gotten only one Republican congressional delegation endorsement in Florida. Everyone else went to Trump, which frankly is pretty embarrassing for him. Because
and quickly to Trump too. It wasn't even like
it wasn't even a debate.
They him and Hod for a bit. It was just like almost immediately. And it wasn't like it was. I mean, obviously he only just announced last week, but it wasn't a secret that he was going to run. I mean, there was the slight chance that he wouldn't, but like as you said, he had nowhere else to go. He'd be out of a job for a couple of years, politically at least, if he waited.
Yeah, he's fucking with people's money now.
Right. And this is a new stage.
His ambition has taken over.
And this is kind of what I was going to get at, right? Where it's like the new phase of the culture war is like almost in competition with pro-business conservatism that defines the American right. You know what I mean? Where it's like they're basically prepared to collapse the Jenga tower in order to win the culture war. And that might play well nationally, but then, for local Republican parties, just at any state level, who need the influence they have over things like both big and small business.
Well, and
it's fucking with the bag.
Let's add an asterisk to that, right? It's not that it plays well nationally. It plays well nationally in a Republican primary.
Indeed.
Because, it's not like, I mean, this isn't like general election winning policy positions, right? This is just kind of like, and I think a lot of it, right, is it's and you're saying like even people in Florida don't really get it. And it's like the people who you see like coming out like just really strong celebrating this stuff are like, your Twitter blue folks. It's like the people who have like they paid for their blue asterisks. I mean, obviously, again, there's that alliance between him and Elon, both sort of, see wokeness, specifically the woke mind virus is the greatest threat to civilization. Words right out of the elephant's mouth, so to speak. And obviously the announcement being tied to, that hilariously awful glorified Zoom call on Twitter Spaces and whatnot. I mean, this is, it's really kind of, again, it's like the party has been increasingly obsessed with winning the primary, which, like, yeah, you have to do that to win the general. Like, it goes to show. But, like, unlike Democrats, where they've kind of disciplined their, primary voters that, like, well, you should really care about, like, winning the election. I don't think Republicans care.
No, I agree with that. I don't think they really. I think that's the thing is that there is not a big enough constituency in the United States, right? The United States type of fascism is not the same as it is in like Germany or Italy or Japan, right? Like it's different. And it's kind of, I mean, Richard Spencer kind of hits on it, right? When he talks about like why he kind of stopped driving so hard and doing all right stuff. Like he's still a fascist, but he's like, well, actually the way things are in America pretty much what we want. Like, it's you're not going to get more than what we get here, right? Like you can have your white town, you just go live anywhere with like an HOA. It's like gated community, like Whitopia. And he kind of realized that because of how the level of backlash he got. Like it's just like American fascism is kind of, it's just different. There's no ethno-state to create here, and there's no memory of it, especially in a modern America where white consciousness is probably at its like most unconscious, right? Like there definitely used to be more of a conscientious whiteness to the United States, but there's we saw segregation, but then they got rid of cultural segregation, right? So you still have the literal material segregation, but your white kids are, fucking favorite rapper is Lil Uzi Vert, and they enjoy black culture. It's like so the blurring. There's been a blurring of like there's not as much of a conscientious whiteness as there was like pre-civil rights era, where people are like, I'm white, god damn it, and I don't want no blacks here, right? Like that's not like a thinking. That's not as explicit. It's like subconscious thinking that people have, but they don't. When you say it out loud, you're like, so we're gonna get rid of the black people and the Jews now. They're like, whoa, I'm not a racist, right? They're a racist, but people don't want to say they're a fucking racist in America, right? Nobody says they're a racist. It's not like in Europe where the people are like, of course I'm a racist. I'm part of the racist party.
Well, and we treat racist. Yeah, we treat racist acts here as almost worse than actually calling someone a racist for being racist. So like, yeah, that's like it is something that we vehemently avoid.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to be. It's the biggest complaint is like being falsely labeled a racist, right? Like it's never like, actually I love being a racist. Like that's not what happens here. People are like, how dare you say I'm actually a racist, right? Like it's always like, no, you're wrong for this. You shouldn't be playing the race card. Obviously they're racist, but like people don't embrace it. They don't want to embrace it here. Normal people don't want to. So normal people can be horribly racist here and still be like, I'm not racist. Like, what are you talking about? We joke about it. We're like, oh, I'm not a racist. I have black friends.
We just have questions.
I just, yeah, but I'm not a racist. I have Mexican friends. I have black friends. European style fascists would not be like, I'm not a fascist. I have Jewish friends. Like, they're like, oh no, I would kill Jews. Give me the chance. Like, I've been to Hungary. I've heard them. Right. They're like,
yeah, oh, no, Europe is a lot more intense with it.
They're like, oh, I hate Jews. Fuck, hey, Italy's like, I hate Jews. I hate blacks. I hate Muslims. Fuck, I hate Southern Italians. Goddamn. like, so it's just different. The fascism here is different, and so you kind of like American fascist movements have this weird sort of like segmentation that makes them, the real like ethnocentric culture warrior fascist here really hurts the regular actual already existing operating fascism, and actually kind of hurts it. And they always have like a very delicate balance, and I think the balance is force. The force of fascism is in the United States there's no balance, and so and that's kind of how like DeSantis gets viewed. He's like, he'll restore balance to the fascism by really doing it. That's like the whole argument within the Republican Party. They're like, who will be the restorer of the balance of our fascism? And the Democrats are like, so, what do you guys want? So yeah, I don't know. America's weird. It's weird. It's a weird place for fascism. We try to extrapolate and like, DeSantis is like a colonial fascist, and he is like Franco, right, coming back from Morocco, kind of style fascist. Like he was on the frontiers, but that's not how.
Yeah, that does seem to be the concept. The comparison is that he's closer to like Franco than.
Yes, that's him.
Who's not really, integrated into like the American memory of fascism, right? Like, I mean, our view of it's so tied to like the Nazis and Hitler that we kind of have really limited the scope of how we interpret it, right? It's like, oh, well, it's literally gas chambers. Anything short of that, not Nazism, not fascism, we're good to go. And that's kind of had this really destructive
pretty much
view.
Yeah. No, it's true. And also, though, I think there's like a fact that there is not like a significant demographic in the United States that's relatable to that sort of like Franco or like World War I Nazi vet style of fascist, because wars in America are so isolated from the public consciousness and from the public feel. You don't feel the wars. They're not part of our character. They're not part of our day-to-day thinking. They're just a fucking noise in the background, right? Which is done on purpose, right, for the way the American empire operates. But then it kind of creates this weird thing where the fascists that we create who enforce those the colonial wars abroad come back. They actually don't have like a huge base because people don't really relate to them. Like, it's not relatable here. There isn't some huge constituency of people coming back from war who are like marching in the street. Like, so it's weird. It's weird, right? Like, it's difficult. It's really hard for fascists in the United States, right? Like, so how do you?
Yeah,
how
like
do
the
you
American. I think the American fascism is far more preoccupied with maintaining the invisibility of consumer and oppressed, more so than it is relishing in doing the oppression. And I think there's, visceral elements that take pleasure in it, and you could argue that's like the spear tip of the U.S. imperial machine. That's where those guys are, but
well, I mean, that's like kind of this DeSantis constituency,
pretty much.
Like,
but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, even not to turn this into a World War I diatribe, right? But it's like, even if you look at the American context of World War I, it wasn't exactly popular. America gets involved at the last minute, incurs the least amount of damage, and like,
well, not exactly popular is really underselling it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of domestically. I mean, like, Wilson won on, the idea that he wouldn't take us into war.
Right.
Some of the most, like, kind of egregiously authoritarian things that have happened at the national level occur as a direct result of that, right? You have the draft, you have all this stuff because it wasn't popular in the slightest, even with, the relative lack of involvement that the United States had.
Exactly. And it's like, I'd say the American experience of World War I is like, well, how do we come up on top of this? And basically, with the formation of the League of Nations, America boosted its prominence higher after that.
Well, except Congress didn't approve it, and we backed out.
I mean, what I meant more so is like again, I don't believe in great powers dynamics. That game has always been. It just reeks of British colonialism. But if you play it for like the purposes and intents of that. But for the purposes of that game, America definitely came up as, if not an equal to Britain, definitely it's a junior partner, and then post World War II basically inherits it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that all that being said, I think a question I had here on the outline was how do we contextualize the paradigm of Republican orthodoxy that DeSantis offers compared to previous, iconic, not necessarily iconic, but like headlining Republican governors like Sam Brownback, Greg Abbott, Scott Walker. I think the difference here is that DeSantis is quite willing to tank his gubernatorial career in favor of putting all his chips in for a Republican primary. Whereas, Walker in his day basically was like, no, the real fight is, suppressing unions. Brownback was, no, the real fight is, suppressing the Keynesian state, and, Abbott
destroying the education system.
Pretty much. And then, Abbott is, the front lines of maintaining the border, and I'd say, in the practical sense of elevating the culture war, making the prohibitions against abortion in Texas far more punitive and invasive.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird, though, because, like, all the stuff that you described about the border, it's like, yeah, that makes sense for Abbott, but it's like, DeSantis, I think part of his issue is that he's trying to take all of the lanes possible, right? Like, because he's trying to make himself like this border warrior, right? Like, he, one of the,
especially with the Venezuelan refugee thing at Martha's
Vineyard,
right?
Shipping them to,
extremely unpopular in Florida, which is one of the most immigrant-heavy states in the country. Like, this is how you know he doesn't give a fuck about anything domestically. All the anti-immigrant stuff he does, it doesn't make any sense for here. Totally not necessary. All for us, all for show. It's all for a national audience. He actually really might hurt the Republicans long term here if he keeps it up and keeps that rhetoric up, because it's kind of creating a situation where Republican, like Latino legislators are who have to support him are being undermined, right, and being viewed essentially as like untrustworthy and not like essentially traitors to their communities because they're voting for these anti-immigrant things. And so the Martha Stewart shit and what like Martha's Vineyard shit, Martha's Vineyard shit, and so
it's a whole new episode of the Culture War.
It's really hurting. It's really causing actual issues because there's a sort of like I touched on this before in the previous podcast. How there's like kind of like a parallel culture within Florida, like a Spanish-speaking culture that English speakers have no access to. So if you're one of the little white boys with the head on the swivel like me, I've been seeing as soon as the DeSantis anti-immigrant bill got passed, just oh my god, on the Spanish-speaking social media, which is very huge here and globally, like people are talking about the shit that DeSantis is pulling in fucking Peru, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone knows because it's all in their WhatsApp family. So people don't like him now. He's got a really bad reputation, and so people who associate with him, it's really kind of hurting, turning people away, because it is the deal was, and Rick Scott knew this. Like Rick Scott, that's why he did some like very, very moderate immigration reform stuff, like, oh yeah, sure, you can get a driver's license thing. The deal with Florida is that, look, we don't give a fuck if you come here. We're not going to touch you. It's fine. We'll look the other way. You can work here. Your kids can come here. You just got to work a shitty job. Right? That's our deal. Right? Florida is so many immigrants here. It's not possible to really, like, everyone's got family here. It's very easy to come to Florida. It's very easy to come to Florida, right? Like from a lot of these countries. And so the deal, the implied deal is like, okay, like, hey, you can go to Florida. We got family in Florida. That's how much of the world talks, like how the Latin American world talks. Like, oh, we can go to Florida. We'll go to Florida. So that's the implicit deal, was like the Republicans had made. Look, we won't touch immigration. You guys come here, you work the shitty jobs for cheap, and our companies make a fucking ton of money off exploiting you, but you get to stay, and your kids get to stay. That was the deal. So DeSantis just ripped that deal up. Huge mistake for the Republicans. DeSantis doesn't give a fuck. It doesn't affect him. He's trying to appeal to a national audience.
Well, especially given that he's done. Like
he's done. He's done. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for him. It actually does kind of matter for him. Again, it's a little short-sighted because it's like you're not going to win the Florida primary. But regardless, like he doesn't think that's important. He wants to win Iowa. He wants to win New Hampshire or shit like that. So yeah, it's everyone's talking about it. Like whole country, is talking. All Spanish-speaking people in like the country like are talking about it. And then you go to the Spanish-speaking world, people are fucking wow. They're talking about it. I mean, the president of Mexico was like telling people, do not vote for DeSantis. Like this is, I cannot. It's again, English-speaking Americans and our media just are totally not, or missing a massive issue, like a massive American issue.
Or just seems to like not care. And I part of me wonders, and like, I mean, as this primary is kind of developed, or the shadow primary, I guess, it's still, we're a ways away from Iowa, and whatnot. But it's like this, as the shadow primary is developed, it's like I part of me was like, is this just like an obsession to find that? I hate to use the term anti-Trump candidate, which is what I've seen used for him, because I don't find him anti-Trumpian at all. But is this just like this obsession with that they're just like, because you have people like Jeb Bush endorsing him as like this like shining beacon of republicanism that you need to vote for. He has a lot more of this establishment backing, not that much, because I mean Trump has kind of eaten up most of the endorsements, but.
Well, I would say, there's a difference. There's a lot of people who owe Trump, right?
That's
not
true.
There's I would say establishment Republicans definitely like DeSantis a lot more because he's their guy, right?
Yeah, he's a little bit more stylistically in their like image.
He also comes from their same background, right? Like he is in their circles. So
sure,
they like him. They essentially can trust him. They know he won't fuck with their shit. Trump does his own thing, ultimately.
Yeah, and I think that's like a difference that he has versus like some of those like Scott Walkers and Brownback and whatnot. Like Brownback, I mean, he kind of, I mean, I guess he had sort of what's going against DeSantis now, right? Is like you had a lot of Republicans trying to get rid of him by the end because he was seen as just so destructive to not so much them electorally, but just like the finally just acknowledging that like, oh shit, like we've gone too far and like this state is like a smoldering crater basically. When it comes to like any meaningful, policies, and livelihood, and like Walker, right? I mean, he was in the crowded primary, and it just didn't matter. I think he definitely shares a lot of the attributes of like, kind of the things that make him unlikable for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, I think that's more or less shared. It's identical between them, but I think that the main reason he's gotten this highlighting is just the fact that he is sort of seen as the leading person who could, beat Trump, and that's looking increasingly less likely.
Yeah, he won't beat Trump. He's gonna lose.
In fact, as we've seen from like Trump's parody of the Twitter space, not the Twitch space. Trump is already better. Yeah, Trump has already been ready to make jabs, if not skewer DeSantis at this point, and he
was doing it long before that, right?
Right, I mean, like Meatball Ron, is that the one he came up with?
Yeah, Meatball Ron DeSanctimonious, shortened to Ron DeSanctus, which doesn't quite work as well. But even like, I mean, we've been sharing some of those ads recently, even before that launch, right? Where there's that Chinese ad, where it's like where you have like Putin and Xi Jinping on the line, and it's like super racist. Like they have like these like super put on accents, but it's like like all that stuff. Like they've been attacked. He's been at his throat for like this entire period, and that failed launch. Of course, you had the rocket ship falling off, and then what was the newest ad? It was the
sales tax.
Ron to sales tax.
Yeah,
the sales tax. Shit, I missed this one.
Did you miss it?
On that shit.
Oh my god, that one's so good. It might even be worth adding into the audio of this.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull the audio. Maybe get your quote out there and just put the audio straight into this one. Because oh my god, if the 2016 primary debates weren't like a spectacle of Trump like dressing down all these establishment Republicans, I'm quite terrified to see how all these people are going to try to like differentiate themselves from Trump, and Trump, now juiced from his like 15th experimental COVID shot is just skewering motherfuckers left and right. It's going to be insane.
Yeah, and like I mean, I know some people point out like some of these like pictures of like Trump where he looks all aged and decrepit, and like he is. Like let's face it, but like that doesn't really matter. He just has to look, mildly presentable for like however many couple hours he's out and about in public. And it's certainly, I mean, anything he does is going to look better than DeSantis, who looks like he's been riddled with dwarfism his entire life. Is constantly
he always stands like he's about to take a shit.
Looking person. Yeah, there's that too. And it's just constantly like just the most awkward looking physical specimen on the face of the earth.
Yeah. Also, just like I don't know how to say this right, but like, what is it with like Florida Republicans outside of Rick Scott not knowing how to like dress or like wear boots? Like Marco Rubio's hairline and boots.
Oh my god, Marco Rubio has the fakest. I remember seeing Marco Rubio after Pulse happened here. The Pulse shooting, He came to Orlando, and I was protesting him, and I think he put his head down, and just like my eyes I almost was blinded from the sun refracting off his fucking head. His hair is so thin, it's insane.
Like his hairline and boots always scared me. It always scared me every time I saw that shit. And then even then, there's that picture of like DeSantis in like the white shirt and the rain boots after the hurricane.
Yeah, the waders and whatnot.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Like, again, it's just I don't know what it is, right? But I think Josh was talking about this on a previous episode where people talk a lot about Trump's own like sense of insecurity and like quibblishness and how he is always trying to one up people. But it's fascinating to see in the way that DeSantis, despite being part of the establishment and having like the traditional Republican political career, is even more insecure and how do I just put it? Just sniveling, smug, really unlikable, right? And I kind of wonder to what extent the fascist psyche that we bring up here, you know, we always talk a lot about how like especially like modern like fascists are always like these alienated kind of dopey guys. And DeSantis himself is no stranger to this, right? Just being the dopey guy himself, even though he has amassed all this power and influence, right? So it kind of just begs the question, right? Like, fascism just being a politics of resentment, it's not just a intellectual justification for those resentments. It's also just like trying to mask your personal insecurity behind this veneer of an ideology that's you know, it's just your insecurity projected broadly on the world.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I kind of going back to my point about like DeSantis reminds me of the type of Italian guy who really wants to prove that they're white, kind of thing, and they're insecure about their perception amongst.
Which is weird because it's a battle they've won like centuries ago. At this point.
Kind of. I wouldn't say centuries ago. I would say
decades maybe.
Post World War II. Post World War II it was like, okay, Italians are white, but you know, frankly, Italians are not a particularly successful white like ethnic group, right? Probably the least successful white.
Probably the last ones into the white category, just from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean they're just not good. They haven't had a lot of success, right? No presidents. Oh for 0 on that. Oh for whatever. I don't know how many Italians have tried even running for president, but none have worked out. And it's like your culture is kind of known for crime. So
yeah,
and so there's like a weird. I think there becomes like a sort of weird sort of insecurity with that for some guys. Where like Ron's Italian family is very Italian. They're not. They're pretty rough. Like his grandparents, I believe, were immigrants and they were alive. He was very close and proximate to that. But he grew up in like St. Pete area, which is a really just like white people town. No Italians, that kind of thing, right? Like, and so he was different. Like he's white, but he wasn't like every other white person where he grew up. And again, I'm doing this is total bullshit. I'm just pulling this out of my ass and anecdotal, just like as an Italian person myself. But I grew up in an area where there's a fucking ton of Italians. So I didn't really feel, I didn't really have that. But where he grew up in Florida, there wasn't. And I could see that maybe influencing his weird insecurity, like social insecurity and need to kind of prove himself amongst his peers, amongst his like his WASP white peers.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think he's a Catholic. I don't know if he is. Let me see. Look up.
Let's look this up.
Yeah, Christian sect. Is he Catholic?
He was raised Catholic, but he and his wife rarely discuss the particularities of the religious beliefs in public.
Interesting. Yeah, he definitely tries to hide that he's Catholic.
The mysterious Catholic faith of Ron DeSantis.
Yeah,
from America, the Jesuit Review.
Okay. So that's interesting, you know. I mean, and like his wife, I don't believe comes from a Catholic background. I believe she's just like a regular white person. I think she came from like a Lutheran household. I don't fucking know. And so something like that. And so I think Ron's kind of weird about that. Like, why wouldn't he be going around trumpeting the fact that he's like this Catholic pro-life warrior, right? I think he's got a weird relationship to it.
Yeah, there's a Catholic lane open in the Republican primary, just from what I understand.
Yeah, but he doesn't take it. Why doesn't he take it? Because I think, that's part of his weirdness, like his weird resentment, right? Like, I'm the whitest motherfucker. I'm the most racist bastard. White. I went to fucking Harvard and Yale, and
which is a very Catholic thing to do.
I feel like they've
play it.
I feel like Christianity in the Republican Party now is just so like obsessed with evangelicals and whatnot that like they don't even. That's the only demographic they talk about.
Well, even a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Like he's an South Indian Hindu from Ohio, right? And whether or not, actually, let me look this up. Did he convert? Because now I'm very intrigued. Hang on. Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay, so he is a Hindu, but the way he talks about it, he just he found a way to. Yeah, he just talks about like he's an evangelical, and he basically did the thing that like Brahmin Hindus
talk about being Jewish.
Pretty much is like, yeah, like Brahmin Hindus, I can speak like from that background, right? Have basically found a way to like present themselves as amenable to both WASPs and tradcaths when applicable. Because you get to be the comprador who makes it over from India to the United States. So you are self-selected to be part of the bourgeois in that case. So that explains his behavior. But I mean, yeah, like there is this you got to present yourself as evangelical friendly, whether or not you got to
essentially act like essentially be an evangelical, even if you technically aren't, right? You plausible like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro does not talk like there are like politically conservative Jews, right? That's not some new thing. Now they're not. They're always.
Well, he uses his faith really just to attack leftist Jews.
It's very
that's
weird.
all he does for it.
He does not. Yeah. Alan Dershowitz is a good example of like a politically conservative.
Yeah.
Like he's unmistakably Jewish, right? But here's the thing: Alan Dershowitz is that he's like a little warrior for conservatism. He's like an orc guy, right? He doesn't get to be the real white kind of guy, right? Like he's the in-betweener. I mean, Epstein, you can make an argument like Epstein as like a Jew was part of the deal, right? Like, look, you're a Jew, so usually we wouldn't let you people, into our country club, into these parties, but if you're getting us these kids to fuck, sure, right? And that's kind of like the deal. And so you like these white ethnics or like white people who are still not super removed from when their people were not fully white act like this enforcement class. And so I think DeSantis. And then
that's J.D. Vance with hillbillies, even. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for real. It's the same thing. It is. It's a real phenomenon. Meanwhile, those motherfuckers who actually live in Martha's Vineyard don't have anything to prove. They're from, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, the Hamptons, like, their families have been here forever. They own the plantations, right? So, the Italians, the Jews, the hillbillies, they're like, please, let me be the slave driver. Please, like, let me prove my worth to you.
It's kind of weird, like this conversation about like sort of struggling with achieving that white identity, if you will, because like like you look at this entire primary field, right, and it's like people who are like just most people who are like unambiguously of color, and like Nikki Haley, who like desperately tries to disguise that she is. So it's kind of weird that you have someone who is definitely far more white passing than them. That seems to still somewhat, maybe we're getting too psychoanalytical with him in that regard, but like still seems to struggle with like certain parts of his identity, despite the fact that it shouldn't necessarily be a problem.
We lost you there for a second. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back. My internet just briefly glitched out. I was only gone for like 10 seconds.
Yeah, nothing I can't fix in editing. Don't worry.
Sorry.
So I think we were cutting off about... Josh, what was your last point?
Yeah, so like, I mean, it's kind of interesting that, like we're, and maybe we're getting a little too psychoanalytical with DeSantis and like, sort of, the idea of, sort of
fun.
Yeah. But I mean, like, in the idea, like, if he is, like, sort of, certain insecurities are rooted into a, potential lack of whiteness tied to Italian heritage. Because, like, you look at, 90% of their primary field, and it's mostly, like, people of color. And, like, Nikki Haley, who is maybe even less secure with her nationality than DeSantis is.
I mean, Ted Cruz. He's Cuban.
Yeah, there's Ted Cruz. I mean that's not this field.
We talked about how he was
Cruz historically, yeah.
He's kind of like a proto DeSantis in like his political.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's not a coincidence that it's like.
It's this long-standing trope in the party. It's just interesting where it's like people who have more, maybe more obvious ethnic backgrounds that are so that you still have that adversity even with more passing circumstances.
Well, on this subject, right? Because I know it may seem kind of superfluous to go down this line, right? But on the subject of American fascism, we gotta look at Fordism to a certain extent, right? And the thing about Henry Ford, if people aren't aware of this specific aspect, was his insistence on assimilation for immigrants. Like, people talk about Henry Ford being this like big proponent of immigration, but he never was in this pluralistic or multicultural model that American liberals, see themselves as defending today. He was more so of this idea of like, yeah, you get to come to America, and then we want you to basically be like a spicy wasp if you can pull it off. So at these like Ford like employee like gatherings and stuff, they would have this like weird like ritual where like ethnic employees would come in to this box wearing like the national dress of their country or some kind of cultural like garb, go into this box, and then come out like in kind of like a graduation ceremony, except a little more cursed, as like American presenting in like suits and ties, you know what I mean? So there's something to be said about the construction of whiteness and American conservatism, American fascism, whatever we want to call this new formation, right? And how that by design it is contradictory. By design, it's this feat of social engineering that takes disparate European groups in just the white context and tries to like hegemonize them or homogenize them.
Like, I mean, not just European groups though. I mean, Arab, Persian, right? Like, that's why Dearborn exists. The Ford they're literally like, ooh, Syrians, they won't join unions. Like, here we bring them over, bring the Arabs over.
And that's probably like one of the initial pushes for like just to like speak from the Indian experience, right? Like, I think in the early cases of Indian immigration, there was like a demand by Indian immigrants to be counted on the census as white, because there was like this. Yeah, and then it's also like probably why Arabs got counted as white on the census and whatnot, So, and there's again, if anyone's
they literally lobby for it. It's the same thing with Mexicans. The whole reason we have a category called Hispanic is that it was a reaction to the Chicano movement that was about reestablishing like a Mexican indigenous identity in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Conservative Mexican like business elements, small business elements, or whatever, essentially lobbied the United States to create the category of Hispanic, right? To draw that away and to allow sort of like an integration of Mexicans into like a white or category and to defang the revolutionary and indigenous inspired Chicano identity. It's very common.
Yeah.
It's very common.
Yeah, like you can't.
It's why Arabs and Persians are counted as white today. People don't know. They're like, what the fuck? Like, you're white? So yeah, because they lobbied for it. It was good. Italians lobbied for it. They're like, please, like, let us be white. It's a real thing. It's a historic thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of like how, in trying to unpack certain realities of class identity in America, it's both obscured and intimately tied to these racial constructions, right? So we can't really unpack. I mean, to unpack DeSantis and the culture war, we kind of have to get into some of these discussions, even if it seems superfluous.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's an underanalyzed element of his identity is his Italianness. I really do. I really think that's part of it.
In conclusion, I'm definitely going to cut in that clip of The Sopranos where he's talking to the therapist and he's talking about Wonder Bread Wops in the context of one of his neighbors.
Am I to understand that you don't consider yourself white?
I don't mean white like Caucasian. I mean a white man, like our friend Cusimano. Now, he's Italian, but he's American. It's what my old man would have called a Wonder Bread Wop. He eats his Sunday gravy out of a jar.
Because that basically it still holds up. And I don't joke when I say The Sopranos was a documentary.
It's very accurate in portraying like a lot of the social relations in Italian communities, but there are people who specifically pursue that Wonder Bread Wop. They want that. They want to just be white. And Santos is one of those guys. He just wanted to be white. It's funny because in Florida, part of the reason he won in 2018 is that low information Spanish-speaking voters thought he was Latino because it was his last name was DeSantis. And so they're like, oh, that's a real thing.
What's that thing they say about Irish last names in elections?
You can't escape it, DeSantis. What was that?
Oh, what's that thing they say about Irish last names in elections?
I don't know. What did they say?
No, that's okay. So maybe that's just a thing that I recall from one of my election classes. Basically, Professor, you had him, Josh. Elections class. And basically, he was like, if you want to win a race in like the Detroit suburbs, easiest thing you can do is have an Irish last name.
Oh, yeah.
Easiest thing you can do.
Same thing in Florida. Have a like. I mean, even my last name, like I'm Italian. People just assume, they're like, oh yeah, you speak Spanish. I don't. I have no Latino connections, right? But people see my last name and they assume they'll speak to me in Spanish. So here in Florida, DeSantis totally benefited from that, which I think he kind of resents.
Yeah, which is kind of weird considering, his general like pragmatism and like just whatever it'll take him to win, a given election. But, I guess like, certain tactics that are too dirty, like pretending to be a person of color.
It totally countervails his whole thing, like his whole identity. So yeah. I don't think he even tried to speak in Spanish or anything like that during his initial election, and even Rick Scott will do that stuff. And Rick Scott is like the fucking whitest motherfucker you've ever seen in your life.
Oh yeah, I mean it doesn't get any.
He looks like a young Mitch McConnell with some of those pictures. I'm not going to hold you. When it comes to looking like a reptile, he really fits the bill.
Yeah. Rick Scott will be like, "Hola, mi nombre es Rick." Like he'll do that.
Oh God.
He'll do that. But DeSantis won't do that. DeSantis will. I've never seen DeSantis do that. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. I've never seen him do that. Because DeSantis is like, I'm white, damn it.
Well, when it does come to pandering to elements of the Latin community, right? Like, I did want to ask, like we have talked before about this Miami industrial complex, and maybe with some of the things we've discussed today, I'm starting to realize like it is a significant constituency, but it's more so influential than it is sizably large, right? And I think like one thing I did want to bring up is like he went out of his way to talk about accepting political dissidents from Venezuela and later Colombia after was it Castillo who won in Colombia? Pedro Castillo.
Castillo was Peru.
My bad. So yeah, it was Petro in Colombia. My bad. So like in both cases, actually, he was like trying to make the whole, oh my god, socialism is back on the rise in Latin America, and we gotta reignite that anti-socialist fervor in Florida. So I'm just wondering, like, is he how much of a soldier against communism is he in that respect, or is it just the same amount you'd expect from a Florida conservative?
I think he's like the same amount. He's actually kind of moved off it again because he's done a lot of anti-immigration stuff. He's really come out against it really hard. And so as a result, he's actually hurting the Miami industrial complex right now because they're associating with him. And so he's doing all this he came out, he's like, oh, I love you, Venezuela. Like, but now he's supporting them. Like he's actively like going against these people, and so he's turning the general public against him on that. And so the Miami industrial complex is suddenly has like this weird quandary where this guy that they're so heavily allied with, and they can't. They're very much reliant on, so they won't vote against him. They won't publicly come out against him, and they have it. He's fucking them. He's fucking them. And so there's a weird dynamic right now. His anti-immigration stuff has been very, very overlooked by the national media for its impacts domestically, and we'll probably see the ripple effects of those in the next few years, because he did some really drastic shit in his anti-immigration bill, which just really bad. So the Miami industrial complex is like, how do we message around this? Like, because now people are like, well, you say you're against communism, but you're fucking deporting us, so fuck off. Yeah. He's even deporting Cubans.
Wow.
Yeah, they're going against everybody. So it's ballsy. Right? And I don't think this will work out. This will have pushback.
It's just a principled stance.
Yeah.
Nothing more.
Yeah, I mean, he's all in, all chips. The way you should view DeSantis is all chips in on becoming president. He does not.
That's a risky gamble.
It is, and he's going to lose because he's an idiot and a loser. But yeah, that was his whole like everything you're seeing out of him recently, the past years or so, is just make me president, please. It's like it's all so he can make an ad and be like, I'll protect our borders. Not popular in Florida. Part of the reason the Democrats lost in 2016 was Obama deported so many people. It hurt turnout for Spanish-speaking communities here. And then Biden is a terrible candidate for Florida because he was the vice president of the deportation machine.
And in fact, he's only ramped up that machinery since he took office.
Yeah, so like Obama actually really betrayed a lot of people here because he deported so many people. And ICE really ramped up their shit here under Obama. And so people were kind of like, why the fuck do I care about voting for a Democrat?
Which is kind of what probably the last question I have. I think we've really, at least for everything I have against this guy, I think we've run the gamut. Josh might have a little bit more, but DeSantis has clearly done a lot of work, and in your estimation, is going to cost Republicans in the near and far term future. At the same time, though, as you've specified, like the Florida Democratic Party does not seem ready to meet the challenge. So what's the prediction, if anything, for like what comes next? Is it the same thing we've come to see nationally, where even though the right is largely unpopular, voter turnout and voter apathy increase, and it's the same amount of, well, whoever votes anyways. And it'll be that cohort arguing ad nauseum, or is Florida unique in some way and uniquely situated to maybe turn the tide? If at all.
Right now, the only thing that will help here is I don't see a sort of like a fix on the way. There's really nothing within the Democratic Party that indicates it. And so I think you're going to see what it really will take is a long-term left-wing organizing here, because the Democrats are so completely a part of the system that we see today that you can't really separate that. There's not some sort of like reform on the horizon as a result. The Democratic Party is in a real opposition, and so even though I do think I'm not going to like pretend even though I'm a socialist, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, that's the only way like possible for Florida, like people to start. No. I think Jacksonville's a good example. The mayoral election, the woman, she won there. She's a former TV news anchor. She has very good name ID, like recognition in there. Normal Democrat, I wouldn't even say like progressive, pro-choice, a woman. She got outspent, pretty easily by the Republican candidate who was endorsed by DeSantis. And he's also literally the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Jacksonville. And she fucking killed him by 5 points in an off-year election. Because frankly, she was just like a normal Democrat, and that was actually like appealing to people. And she put some effort into it and like talked about things that people cared about. And Jacksonville was the largest city in the United States until this election with a Republican mayor. So I think that's kind of indicative of the fact that it actually wouldn't be particularly hard to flip Florida into being like a quote unquote blue state. The problem is like that would actually cause the Democrats issues nationally, because then the Florida, if Florida was always blue, then there's no way you could ever lose another presidential election ever again if you're a Democrat.
Yeah.
It's not possible. New York, Florida, California, great. You just need like 5 other fucking places. It's over.
So it would almost force the Democrats' hand into doing shit. Exactly.
It'll force Democrats to do shit. Right? People will be like, look, you're never losing, so you better start actually like helping us. They don't want that. So they really don't want Florida to like get fixed. And they're gonna work against fixing it. They throw wrenches in it. It's gonna take socialist like left-wing people to do it. Right?
Which is so weird and incompatible, because for years they've been operating. God, who's the guy who came up with it? But they've been operating under this whole demographics as destiny stuff, or like just to deform their electoral politics, right? So like, oh, we're gonna flip. In Florida didn't so much come up in that conversation, I guess, because it was always seen as a 50-50. But like, we're gonna flip Texas. Florida will be locked in, and like all of these states will just be locked in for Democratic voting blocks, and yet, like you said, it's sort of against their maybe broader political agenda of doing nothing, or doing the bare minimum, to be maybe a little bit more charitable. That they are sort of against actually fostering that whole.
If they wanted to never lose ever again, they would just like pass a new voting rights act. Like they would just like make automatic voter registration a thing, and then make it so that in federal elections, and they could do this for federal elections. They could go, okay, fine, state elections, make your own rules, but for federal elections, everybody has to be able to vote, felon or not, prison or not, everyone's registered. Fuck off. They could do that. They don't. They'd never lose ever again. Democrats would never. They'd win Texas. They'd win Florida. It would be impossible. It would be. I mean, Texas people don't realize like Texas is like a fucking hilariously low voter turnout. It's always like 45% or something. It's like insanely low. And then, but same thing with like Florida, right? Like I'll give an example, right? Florida. Okay, so you have 10% of the population felons can't vote. Overwhelmingly, like black people, and then poor white people and poor brown people. It's something like 1 out of 4 or 5. I think it's actually 1 out of 4 black men in Florida can't vote because of a felony. You know, it just might affect elections a teeny tiny bit when 1.4 million people can't vote in them by default. And then you have about, and this is I'm probably really lowballing this. You don't really get accurate. It's really hard to discern. But let's just say lowball. 10% of Floridians are immigrants who are not citizens. And that's not necessarily undocumented, but just like they have green cards, so they can't vote. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different statuses you can have. So 10%. Yeah. And I think that's pretty low. There's probably a lot more people who are immigrants. So you have 10% of the adult population who are immigrants can't vote. So you have 20% of your workforce, your working citizens, not citizens, but working residents who can't vote. So you're down to 80% of people. Okay, great. Well, what's the voter registration rate? It's like about 80%. It's like 80, 85%. So 80% of 80%. Right, so we're getting low here, are registered. Like, so you have another like 20% of people who don't register to vote at all. So you're at like 40-ish, maybe let's be nice. Let's just say it's another, like, take 10% off. You have about 30% of people who can't vote. Who, like, they're either registered or they literally can't register. It's illegal for them too. Mm-hmm. So you have 70% of people left over now. Well, what's the voter turnout? In the most recent election, it was 54%. Okay, so you're not even close to a majority of Florida adults voting. You're not even like close. You're not even really close at all. And the Republicans still could barely win here. Like, even though these elections are just essentially like squabbling amongst like 40% of people of the state. They still barely win up until recently. So it just passed the Voting Rights Act, and people are like, "Oh, pass the Voting Rights Act, do it. It's over. It's fixed. You've stopped it." The Democratic it'll just be Democrats coming to Congress from Texas and Florida. You'll have super majorities in the House. You'll have a majority in the Senate. You'll have a president as Democrat in forever, perpetuity. Well, they don't want that. They don't want that. So they're fine with DeSantis, and that's why the media likes it, because he comes from their circles. Like, they don't care about the fascism. I mean, they try to. The media. I remember the Atlantic. Some writer for the Atlantic was really insisting, like, he's not fascist. He's really not fascist. So, like, he's not fascist. Like, bro. He is really, like, he's definitionally, like, quintessentially American fascism. But he went to Yale, he went to Harvard, he hung with the dudes, he hangs with the guys. He's nice to the media. He doesn't attack the media like Trump does. Right? That plays a big role. They like that. Mm-hmm. He's not.
I guess, sort of like one other thing I think we'd probably be remiss not to cover a little bit is kind of how his like we talked a little bit about how Florida is a pretty gay state, and you have like all these anti-gay policies. How does this generally play with the Florida public though? Right. I mean, you have some businesses that it's like Disney that it's been mildly disagreeable with, but how is it like? Is this as lethal to them as some of like DeSantis' immigration policies? Is it less so? Like, where's the finger on the pulse there?
I think it's hard for people to discern the effects. I will say that his anti-trans like legislation and work. I have trans friends who are leaving. I have trans friends who have had their medication stopped. So people are going to leave. People are leaving. It is the major civil right, like the Equality Florida put out a travel advisory here against coming to Florida if you're gay. Mm-hmm. It's having effects, right? Like a lot of like gay oriented or gay, like pro-gay businesses or like gay friendly businesses really came out hard against it. like against the Equality Florida thing because they're like, no, you're gonna hurt us. And I will say, like, Christina Pushaw, she was trying. DeSantis is freak. Oh my god, this lady looks like such a fucking freak. She blocked me on Twitter too. Fucking blocked me on Twitter. She will not unblock me. But his like press secretary or whatever the fuck you want to call her.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, see, look at the beach, like look at this pride parade here in Florida. Gay people like Equality Florida travel advisory. What a joke. So they actually are like, they do try to be like, like gay people aren't leaving here. They're not taking their dollars out of here. But it's starting to happen. It's having an impact. People are afraid. And it's people talk obviously, and especially in minority communities like the gay community. There's a lot of conversations that happen, and so when your friends are like, oh, I can't get my hormones, I'll get fucking fired. I'm getting investigated by the state because I showed a Disney movie that every single kid had their parents sign a permission slip to allow me to watch, and it has like a 30-second cameo of like a gay kid being investigated by the state for that. People talk, and it's causing problems, right? Like there's been lots of pride parades in like in not like major towns that have canceled. So that's gonna hurt. That hurts businesses, right? Like St. Cloud is one of these like cities around Orlando. It's not that close, but it's in the county over. They canceled their pride parade because they're like, we can't really guarantee people's safety. We can't really guarantee like we're not breaking the law. We can't really risk it. We can't afford it. Well, it's like there's a lot of businesses in downtown St. Down which are like, well, fuck me, like that's a good day for us, make some money. It's having impacts, right? Like it's definitely having an impact. It's just not as rapid or as like strong, I think, as the Spanish-speaking population, because the Spanish-speaking population, frankly, is just far, far bigger and far more integrated into the political system of Florida, and so very much like it's like literally like, oh, like I literally was talking to a friend of mine. She's like, my cousin husband is a Republican state legislator, and he voted for this. And we all hate him now. You know what I mean? Like, and she's like, you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of conversations I've been having with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but with the gay community, it's like that on a smaller scale. So it's all having an impact. Again, it's a huge mess. It's going to have serious like repercussions for Florida, like socially, economically, because again, the state is like a gay immigrant state. it's really gay. It's really immigrant heavy. It's really Spanish speaking heavy. And so it's like, what are you doing? It's so weird that you're doing this here. Like the head of the Trump, like the Republican campaign effort in 2020 is like married gay man in Orlando, right? Like, fucking hate that guy. Super annoying. Randy, his name's fucking Randy.
Of course, his name's Randy. Of course, his name's
Randy. And also, he also did insurance fraud. He like lied that his patio furniture got stolen.
Well, I mean that's kind of.
Oh no, of course. He's a perfect like Trump guy. It's like, okay, this is who they're alienating. Like Randy, the gay insurance frauder, right? Perfect Republican, literally would die for Trump. And DeSantis is like, it's illegal for you to exist. It's weird. It's weird how hard it's gone in this, and it's just because he wants to be president. He thinks it's a winning message. And what does it say about the country?
And there's been such a, I think there's been a lot of like fear and concern, rightfully so, about like what these policies would do at the national level. But Florida really is sort of kind of like one of the worst states to just like have to. Not that any state would ideally get to experience this, but just demographically, a really bad state to have to like deal with these policies, on the ground, especially as this sort of laboratory for fascism.
I think it's a laboratory for fascism. I don't really know. I think that's it. I think that's like the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what to say about a lot of this stuff, right? Because it's like the stuff is happening. We're kind of powerless as we currently stand, right? And I'm not here to blackpill anybody. Of course, you know, you got to be involved. You got to do what you can. You got to speak out on it. But the problem is, I guess, is that we're still in a we have yet to see what will happen. The fights that are happening are still in a very early stage, and you know, much like you know Florida being a test ground for some of this, it's also happening in places we don't expect trans people to live because of the assumed nature of everybody living on the coast in the queer community, right? So, you know, especially in places like the Dakotas, Wyoming, some other parts of the Midwest, you know, like it's just as bad there as it is in Florida. And I think Florida is uniquely in a spot where it's a test spot for the right, but it also has an outsized spotlight on it from the media and from national attention. When in reality, you know, and I'm not really saying, I'm not trying to run cover here. It's more of like, we can look at Florida as one of many examples. And in fact, like we should start looking at it as if DeSantis is following a national trend, then we have to start looking at it as where else are people being affected by the same idea. And I don't know if that offers anyone any solace. I don't even know if that's strategically useful to observe. I'm kind of running out of ways to say the same thing again and again, right? But it's just, you know, it's always sad to think of this stuff, especially, you know, when Pride Month starts tomorrow, but we cannot delude ourselves into thinking everything's okay.
No.
That's where I'm at with it.
It's worse than ever, frankly. And it's probably going to get worse, unfortunately. And DeSantis has essentially created a template for how, he's created a template for how you can just like kind of just quickly fuck it. You can just quickly and like throw complete disorder and chaos throughout like a massive state like Florida. You're making overnight banning abortion, banning protests, banning gay people, trans, all this stuff overnight. You know, there's no social movement, there's no social base, there's no people, there wasn't protests. He didn't even run on any of this stuff. None of this stuff he ran on even in 2022. You know, for the most recent election. It's like shocking almost. It's shocking to the system. And so, you know, I think he's really created a template. He's not going to become president, but he's like paved a way for worse shit to come.
And I think that is, you know, the fundamental danger of fascism is that, yes, it is funny to watch fundamentally pathetic people wage these, you know, these impotent tantrums publicly. It's amazing to watch them be insecure. And at the same time, these insecure adults are creating worlds of pain for people who did not ask for it, who did nothing to deserve it. And that's all I can say is that's why we're talking about it. That's why we have to talk about it. I wish we leave a point of bearing witness to suffering and doing something about it, and what we have available to us is limited in certain effects, but Grayson is a member of the DSA International Committee and a member of the Orlando DSA. And I know DSA can be a bit controversial at times, but I mean, you know, maybe I'm merely just asking for myself here is like, does joining, you know, socialist organizations, even if it seems futile at times, or even if it feels like exacerbating dealing with some of these public sessions, like, there is a practical use to being part of an organization, isn't there?
I mean, there's a huge benefit to it. I mean, first of all, it's like you're talking to people who are not, you're not alone. You're being provided in a space where there's like ideas and consideration and like validation of your feelings and like thoughts and reactions and the material realities that you're all experiencing. And to a small extent, you can mitigate or react to it and affect to it and bring more people in and educate people. And so it's necessary, right? Like you have to do it. You don't have a choice, right? Like if you want to sit on the sidelines, that's fine. But you will eventually it just will consume you, or you will completely tune out. And like here in Florida, it's definitely been extremely demoralizing for people. Yet our DSA chapters are not like going away, right? Like, they're probably, we're working, we're trying. We've had victories in the past few years, despite the catastrophic nature of like things. We've won 2 elections actually in Florida. We got the $15 minimum wage, and then we won a city council election in St. Petersburg. My good friend Richie Boyd. Stuff like that, like little things like that. So it's like proof of concept kind of stuff. So I really highly recommend. You have the time. You should be a member of like a socialist organization. It's important. It's important to develop. It's important for your political development. It's really taught me. It's educated me probably more than anything politically. Being involved in DSA, just like doing like internal politics stuff. Like I've learned a lot. I've definitely gotten a lot smaller, and it helped me understand situations better and apply what I've learned. Also, I apply what I've learned as like someone who's come up through the Florida political scene to my experiences in DSA, and so we need people from diverse backgrounds and experiences to be like participating in the socialist movement to kind of like facilitate that. It's important. It's important for everybody. It's good for your it's good for your head too. It's good for your well-being, I think, to be like, okay, not crazy. There's a lot of people who feel this way. And there's a lot of stuff that socialists are doing across the country and winning. Look, tenants unions across the country are forming, and really that's very much socialist, educated, and organized, and involved, and lots of cool stuff from that. We're seeing upsurge in like radical labor action, and we're seeing the abortion movement, the emergence of like more radical action among that. Again, people who are socialists, and ultimately it's a necessity. So that's all I have. Yeah, I mean I rambled a little bit, but join a fucking socialist organization. I'm a DSA member. I would say I'm pretty far on the left, right? Like I'm a probably ML-ish inspired. I guess that's probably a more accurate way to describe it, right? Like there's really space for anybody in the org. Sometimes I think people.
It is a self-styled Big Tent for a reason, exactly.
Yeah, it's a Big Tent. I think there's also more left-wing people in the tent than sometimes people on social media observe or feel.
Oh, exactly. And every chapter is different.
Yeah, I'm not alone at all. Like not even like nationally. Like I don't know. And it's just I think it's a good place to be. But again, if you don't want to join DSA, that's fine. Just make sure you're a part of some sort of organization. DSA is just like my home. That's what I've been a part of, active member of DSA since 2019. So it's like okay, that's what I can talk about. I can't speak to other orgs, but I have no problems with anybody else either.
Yeah, is it? Go ahead.
Well, this would be an uncharacteristically optimistic note to go out on.
I mean, ultimately, I think socialism, like things are terrible, brutal, but my experiences are. It's funny working in Florida politics as long as I have. The only time I've ever won anything, and significant shit too. The $15 minimum wage campaign, and then the city council election in St. Pete, which was historic because St. Petersburg actually historically, like the elections are set up specifically so socialists can't win. Crazy history. I don't need to get into it, but literally the elections are designed so socialists can't win. And we won, right? The minimum wage goes up every year. It's going to be 15 in a couple of years here in Florida. Millions of people are getting their wages raised. We did it with a super majority of the vote. You have to get over 60% of the vote here. We did that. So, socialism in Florida. If we could do that in Florida, where everyone says, "Oh, we can't socialism, no, you ruin everything." If we can do that here, we can fucking do a lot more in this country. And people really can and will believe in us and join us. And so, I'm not like negative, right, about. I'm realistic about the prospects of the country, but I'm not negative about like, can there be something done about it? Yes, we can do something about it.
Always there could be something done about it. And this is I might edit part of this statement is that I've had certain misgivings with people in my local chapter, but I'm still thinking about when the moment's right. Maybe I should get involved again and just do something for my own self-interest. Let me do something.
Yeah, I mean, and look, your chapter might be run by people that you don't particularly like, but there's probably going to be like a subsection of the community that are people more politically aligned with you, and you can talk and organize with them and
exactly
go from there. So there's a lot of stuff.
Exactly. And on to maybe magnify the impact of this positive note we're trying to end on. This is one that I wanted to get to at the start of the episode. Before I get to Josh, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think that, that's, I was kind of joking with the uncharacteristically, I was somewhat serious, but uncharacteristically positive note to go on, and we do get a little dour sometimes. But, it's always nice that, there's that these organizations can accomplish things, right? I mean, maybe not, expediently at all times, right? But, it's like there's ways to get involved and sort of fight back against, DeSantis more specifically, in this instance, or other, groups who are passing, just as repugnant of policy.
Absolutely. And speaking of dour notes and measuring optimism versus realism, I think earlier in the year, Grayson, you had outed yourself with a post on Gundam. And if this show is about anything, it's about fucking Gundam. So we're gonna have to hit you up with the usual slew we ask everybody who makes it through that we find out about. So favorite series, favorite character, and favorite mobile suit.
I need a second to think because there's a lot there, and I'm really bad about picking favorites in general. I'm gonna admit that. I'm like a fuck it, like not just Gundam, like in general. People are like, "What's your favorite of this?" And I'm like, I love everybody. I think my favorite Gundam series. Shit.
There's no wrong answers except for Seed.
No.
The body's already taken that, so
No, I don't think. I didn't really care for Seed too much. I mean, my favorite Gundam is just the original, right? Like the original Gundam.
Okay.
It's boring, but it's just like as a little kid, I thought it was just badass, and I've always liked it.
It's iconic.
I do like also the unicorn Gundams. So
yeah.
God, I need to think of. I think my favorite series is what is? Oh my god, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name. Is it the one where it's like, I don't know if it's a mainline one, but it's where it's like following a unit. Oh
wait, the MS team.
I think it's 08th MS team.
Is it the one where like they're in like the jungle and like all that shit?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep, that's 8th MS team. That's 8th MS team.
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Can't go wrong with that one. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Like I'm very like I just like the gritty setting, like the guerrilla warfare shit. Like I like the I'm definitely weird. Like I like the space stuff in Gundam, but whenever they're on Earth and they're just like grinding shit out, that's what I love in Gundam. I'm just like, yeah, fuck yeah, they're doing guerrilla warfare and I don't know. I like the intensity. I feel like it's very like visceral. You know, my least. You know, it's weird. One of I would say like my least, but like probably my most like whatever Gundam that I'm always shocked at how much people like it is Iron Blooded Orphans. I'm very like whatever about that one.
Yeah, I feel you. That's pretty much
I don't like it.
Whatever to.
People love it though. I'm like, I like read reviews online, and I'm like, is there something wrong?
It's pretty controversial. I've only. It's like a reverse bell curve where it's like people either like really fucking love it or people really fucking hate it.
Yeah.
Adi got to the harem and decided it wasn't for him.
That's my thing too. I did like that. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like,
yeah, because it's just like there's a lot going on in IBO, and like Gundam is already like pretty gritty, pretty visceral in all its incarnations. But then to like just go like fuck it, space harem. I'm like, oh, someone was like, okay, primarily male demographic. Let's just lean into it.
I don't like that. I definitely have like a kind of an aversion into that stuff in anime. And then I was already like Iron Blood Orphans. I was like, okay, kind of a cool concept-ish, you know. And then it's like they spent a lot of time on the harem stuff, and I was just like, I don't want to watch this. I don't know. I mean, I thought it was kind of like some of it was cool. Like, oh, these kids are like child slaves for like a military battalion. It's like a feudal. They have like a feudal society set up.
Right.
The houses. I think there's like. I think it had some good bones. I think it's some stuff that they could have really explored and been cooler about, and they kind of squandered it on the weird relationship stuff that they were like, why don't we both fuck him? And you're like, what?
I'm telling you, there is a hentai industrial complex at the heart of anime, and we don't talk about it.
There is.
We don't talk about it, folks. We don't.
There is. It's true.
Yeah, the thing is, you don't have to throw those people that much red meat. They've got, you know, it's purple already. You know, it's.
Yeah. They just, it's just. And also, I kind of didn't like the main character in that one. I don't remember his name, but I just thought he was kind of like a boring.
Yeah, Mikazuki.
Yeah, I thought he was kind of boring. Anyway.
I'm
like, really? These people are like dying to fuck him. Like this kid, like he's just like, yeah, I kill, and you're like,
in the far off future, ladies are hard up.
Yeah, I like to kill. Please, can I have your baby? I'll even have your like we can both share babies. Really.
It's not even the harem stuff that Adi left off.
I only got to the part where they get to the ship, and then there's like the big titty lady in the other like mobile suit, and I'm just like, I hit like a wall with certain animes, right? Like where I'm either just too busy in life, and I'm like, okay, I can't sit down and watch this, or I just like hit the wall of like, I'm not watching this. I'm gonna have to sit through 10 more episodes of this ridiculous shit. I don't know if I can do this. I'm trying to sit through Double Zeta right now, and I don't hate it. It's just I'm already in a situation where my girlfriend basically controls what we watch for TV stuff. So I have to go out and like watch it on my own volition. I'm like, I don't want to have to watch TV twice, you know? I prefer being outdoors already. I'm that kind of guy, so.
Fair enough.
What's the new one? The Witch one?
Witch from Mercury.
Witch from Mercury.
It's really good. I really fucking like it.
I want to watch it. What platform can you find it on?
It's on Crunchyroll, and then I think they're uploading at least the first season to YouTube now, right?
Yeah, I think they just dubbed the first season.
Okay, great. No.
I don't know if they finished it, but they've been dubbing it. It was like not simul-dubbed, but
I'm a dub guy. I'm a bastard. For Gundam, I like the dubs. I've never watched a subbed Gundam really. I have like a weird thing if I grew up with it.
I think their dubs are usually pretty good, so it's not
weird
like
thing where if I grow up with an anime, right, like as a kid, so like Dragon Ball, the Dragon Ball Z, like GT, whatever, all that, Naruto. If I saw it first dubbed, like that's how I grew up with it. So like Gundam, I grew up watching dubbed, like watching it on fucking Toonami, and I'm like, all right, cool. So I just have like a weird mental thing where I can watch subbed anime, and I like some subbed anime, but if it's how I'm first experiencing, it's just like a childish thing where I'm like, no, I need it in English. But like if you introduce me to like a new series and it's subbed, it's fine. But I need my Gundam. I want that shit dubbed. All right.
Well, first season dub is in progress. I know a guy who's already watching the first season dub, and he's been liking it. So
great.
Okay.
All right. Tight. And I've got something I'm gonna watch over the summer. Now I'm on fucking law school hell. So, but yeah. Gundam. Have you guys ever seen Robotech?
Robotech? No, I haven't.
Oh my god.
I've always intended to get around to it, but I just haven't.
Robotech's such a weird series because it's like a splicing of it's like a redub, but it also like heavily edited and like changed like storyline of some anime called Macross.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so they pretty much butchered Macross into what became Robotech. But honestly, it's good. And that's actually one of the original mech shows that I grew up with. Was Robotech. So I watched Robotech, and then I was like, oh, I'll watch Gundam, and so I kind of went from there. So that's my Gotcha. Robotech though, it's very funny. Like its story is so weird. Like the second series of Robotech is also a completely different show that they just like edit and butcher to be in the Robotech universe. It's crazy. It's crazy. But then they've kind of released media that's actually within the Robotech, like it's made for Robotech. So like there's a Robotech video game that was for the original Xbox. That was actually fucking badass. Like I played the shit out of that.
Yeah, I remember I played that on the GameCube.
Game was good. That game was really good.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah, it gets a little crazy out here. There's a new Gundam game, right? Or that they're going to be releasing.
There's multiple.
Way too many
so
Gundam
there's
games. No, but there's a new one
there's Evolution, which is like the Overwatch one.
Yeah.
Battle Operation just came out with some pretty abysmal looking reviews. Scrolling over to that page.
Was Gundam Evolution? I feel like that had.
So I was playing Gundam Evo earlier this year. It's better than Overwatch, which is the reason to play.
Yeah.
I'd say.
I like how your definition of earlier this year is as late as like
basically as soon as Tears of the Kingdom came out, I stopped playing. That's how my Gundam Evo career has gone. But basically, like I'd say it's pretty fun, especially if you can find a group to play with, or if you just play casual. Like it feels nice. Like there is a good sense of scale, and like the gameplay it's more balanced now with some of the patches, although I used to really like playing the new Gundam, and now it's been nerfed as a result of some of the patches. But I'd say that basically like the problem with the Gundam games is like the games themselves may actually have like good bones, but the player base is always immature. I don't know about the Battle Operation series because I played the demo and I didn't like it. It's in third person, and like this mobile suit will take up like a third of the screen. So it's like, how am I supposed to play this? Like the enemies could just like hide on their side of the screen, and I'm never gonna see it. But with Evolution, it's like you have a solid concept for a game here, but I'd say 70% of the player base is people who, if they can't get a kill in the first 15 seconds of the game, will quit. So I'd say like a good portion of my play experience has been like the game ending because there's not enough players. But then when you can, like it's pretty fast paced and like it gets intense. So all the hallmarks of a good like hero shooter, but I think if you don't like certain elements of the Overwatch game community, it's less like, bigoted than the Overwatch community, but the same, like, selfish play styles, not being a good team player, all that still exists.
That's kind of
pretty much.
101.
Oh, Lance, I gotta get off. It's late for me. Appreciate this. This is a great conversation as usual. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Thanks for this. I think you've been putting out some really cool content, great interviews, like having some cool guests, and I'm really, really glad to have come back on. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, is there anything you want to plug before we let you go?
No, I mean, I plugged socialism. Join.
There you go.
Join a socialist org.
Most important plug socialism.
Yeah.
You did your praxis for the day.
Yeah, do your praxis. Eat your Cheerios, do your praxis. Join DSA or join whatever is your preference, but just get involved.
All right. Thanks again for coming through, Grayson.
Well, thanks for coming on. It was nice meeting you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Well, that concludes our interview with Muffuletta, Matzo, Grayson. And needless to say, I think I'm tapped out on Ron DeSantis. I think we've thoroughly eviscerated him for all he is.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, any closing thoughts before we do the usual ending spiel?
I don't know. Fuck Ron DeSantis, defund the police, protect trans people and gay people. Just do everything that Ron DeSantis isn't doing.
Exactly. I would basically say that if you can do nothing, be self-assured and self-confident, because you will be so fucking normal as a result. You will not see the need to do such just bizarre and inane things. And I gotta shout out Josh and Grayson for their commentary on this one, and it's not for nothing that this interview ended up happening the eve of Pride Month. So once again, here at the Greenhouse, we wish everybody a safe and happy Pride. My heart goes out to everybody in the queer community, regardless of where, all this stuff happens. This community's always fought back. It's resisted certain forms of co-optation, and even though I've spoken a bit pessimistically today and in the past, I don't think queer people owe the world an apology for being themselves. So that's the note I plan on ending that on. In the interim,
that's
exactly.
The note to end it on.
Exactly. Well, Josh hosts a great show called MonsterPop. They cover pro wrestling news and coverage of recent pro wrestling events. I said the same thing twice.
No, it wasn't exactly the same thing. It was two different things.
Homonyms, not synonyms.
Related.
There we go. And I will have the links to MonsterPop in our description, and the links to all of our social media in the description as well. Till next time, dear listeners, take care.